Hello, friends. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm your host, Zen Garcia.
And viewers from across America and around the world. I am your host, Zen Garcia. This is Secrets Revealed here on Truth Frequency Radio, and I thank you always for joining us in live broadcast to share discourse on all things esoteric. I'm greatly honored to be with Dr. Preston Bailey for the next 2 hours, and he's going to be speaking about spiritual warfare and also his work and practice in helping those that have been satanically ritually abused and also that have the dissociative identity disorder and have just been struggling even to find assistance with the scenarios that they've been forced to endure in their life. And so, Dr. Bailey, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Well, thank you, sir. It's a great honor to be with you in this broadcast and to speak with you in the work that you do. I know you're one of, well, probably the few as far as well known for your services and helping others, and you've been exemplary in trying to assist others where they may not be able to find help in any manner at all. And so, if you would, can you just share your any contact information or website or YouTube channel, anything that you'd like to share in that manner, and then we can speak about your book for a short time before getting into your work.
Okay, my website is spiritualwarfarecenter.com. That's Spiritual Warfare Center, CENTER.com. And I tell a little bit there about what I do. I counsel people with spiritual warfare issues, and most of what I counsel are people with dissociative identity disorder. Many of them were satanically ritually abused. Because there's so few people in the world that are experienced in helping these people. I have people I counsel from Canada, from England, Scotland, Australia, France, Germany, even Slovakia. So anyway, I counsel probably just as many people in foreign countries as I do in America. So I've been doing this for a long time. I've been counseling them since 1982. So I have a lot of experience. And of course, there's a lot of issues that are intertwined with it, dealing with the demonic. Mm-hmm. So I'll be talking about that as well. And a lot of people I counsel are either in the Illuminati trying to get out, or in a satanic cult trying to get out, which involves a lot of issues that I'll be speaking about today.
Excellent, excellent. How did you first get involved with this work, and when did you realize that there was truth, behind the ordeal of family members and individuals that are caught up in the Illuminati bloodlines, and that they do practice this ritual abuse even upon their own children?
Yeah, that's really a serious problem. I started counseling people involved in witchcraft in 1972. I was in college at the time, but I lived in St. Charles, Missouri, which was the official international headquarters for the Church and School of Wicca, which is witchcraft. So witchcraft in those days was very common in the city. There was a lot of public school teachers actually teaching witchcraft, like Witchcraft 101 and things like that in the public schools around the area. So I almost had to deal with it at that time. And then gradually things progressed. And then in 1982, I started counseling people who were involved in the satanic cult. And some of them were involved in the Illuminati. So there's actually different types of dissociative identity disorder. I was chairman of the Governor's Task Force on Child Abuse at the time in 1982. So I would educate the public about child abuse and the symptoms of child abuse. And the children, when they're abused or traumatized, they cannot consciously handle severe abuse. So they dissociate. That simply means to separate. So when they have abuse or trauma as a child, the memories, the painful memories that they experience separates from the conscious mind and is stored in the subconscious mind, and automatically a wall of amnesia surrounds that memory, so they don't usually remember it until they're about 30 years of age. The reason around 30 years of age is because when a person is 30, they tend to want to settle down. If they're not married, they want to get married. If it's a woman, they are thinking about having children, but they want to resolve issues from their past. And because their way of thinking changes, then the symptoms of DID begin to rise. They get depressed. They have what's called suicidal ideation, and many things like that. And they may have just momentary flash thoughts. So that comes to the surface. So actually, there's many types of DID. There is religious DID. So DID is formed by religious cults that ritually abuse their children. So I've counseled children raised in religious groups, what we think are semi-Christian, and they abuse their children or ritually abuse their children. There's government abuse. For people who don't believe that is real, there's been many court cases involving governmental abuse in I've got it in front of me, the document dated October the 5th, 2018, which was a case presented before the U.S. Supreme Court. This went before the U.S. Supreme Court. It says this: Uh, it says the people bringing the case were victims of U.S. sponsored mind control technologies operated by operatives, agencies, and or in direct partnership with United States military, law enforcement, and or intelligence agencies or international collaborative are insured their constitutional rights. So, I mean, I have the 75-page document in front of me before the U.S. Supreme Court that is 100% evidence because the U.S. Supreme Court ruled on it. In fact, when Bill Clinton was president, he publicly apologized for people that had been abused by government agencies. Now, what do you think of that?
That's amazing, and it's quite mind-blowing to say the least. That well, we've known and heard about these things going back to MK Ultra and others in that programs and people that have come out of some of these things, like Kathy O'Brien and writing her book and getting help from what became her husband, Mark O'Brien, that these things were discussed and shared. And there have been others as well that have spoken about these programs and how they were made, sex slaves and kind of pimped out to the elite and politicians. And then there's also been Senator John DeCamp in writing the Franklin cover-up and speaking about young children that were given drugs and also trafficked and flown around to different politicians and parties and used as sex slaves, as in that manner as well. And so these kind of things have come from all levels, individuals, adults, children, and the things that they say, like especially in the Franklin cover-up, when they spoke to those foster care parents or whatever, it just is absolutely bizarre and beyond belief. But yet there's these kids have never met each other, and they are confirming witness as to the similarity in the satanic and the sexual abuse that they've endured. And so there has to be some kind of underlying truth to what they're saying. And now, so many people, like individuals like Arizona Wilder, that have come out and also spoken about the ordeals that she's endured in being part of these higher level Illuminati covens and witchcraft groups and satanic groups that are doing things like blood ritual and sacrifice of innocent children and people. And for people like normal Americans, normal human beings, to try to wrap your mind around and to fathom that these bloodlines are even involved in emotionally, mentally, sexually victimizing their own children is so bizarre, and it's so unimaginable as far as the horror that people think it's just beyond reality and beyond what anybody would actually do. But yet I believe these people to be like the bloodline of the devil, the physical progeny, and that they are involved in deep evil that goes generations and generations into the past, and that they have been raised and brought up by their grandfathers, their grandparents, and on and on and on, and that this is the normalization of the families that live in this kind of satanic worship and ritualized abuse. And again, it's just so bizarre and difficult for us to imagine and wrap our minds around. But then, we have individuals like yourself that have worked with many people that have spoken about and now come out about what they have endured. And so, again, that's why we consider it a great honor to be here with you and to have a chance to listen to you and your testimony and your work. And so, going back in the past, Dr. Bailey, how was it that people started to first reach out and they started to tell you about these things? And was it difficult for you to even believe or to suspend your own biases to kind of allow them to speak of all the things they've endured and to really begin to help them by really listening to them and then addressing their issues?
Well, I tend to be a skeptical person on everything.
Yes.
I've been that since I was a child growing up. I tend not to believe what I hear on the evening news, and I tend not to believe things that come out from the government. So I question everything. So I'm hard to convince. So, but I was already chairman of the task force on child abuse, and I found out real quick that adults don't listen to children,
Right.
And that really is the big problem. I read a story of a child who was sexually abused by her father. And this went on for years. And one day she saw a policeman on the street and she ran over and talked to him. And the policeman believed her. And so he went and arrested the girl's father.
Wow.
So, I mean, it took a lot of guts for
Yes.
an 8-year-old girl to do that.
Right. Wow.
So when it goes to court, the judge rebuked the little girl and got onto her for lying and making all this up, and said, "You have to go back home to your father."
Oh my goodness.
So, of course, the abuse got worse after that.
Yeah.
Well, that little girl grew up, and she left home at 18. She managed to go to college, and she said, nobody believes children. I think I'll run for Congress. So it turned out she won, and she became a congresswoman.
Awesome.
So from the congressional floor, she told that story. She named her father, and she named that judge who rebuked her and didn't believe her, and sent her back home to her child molesting father.
Wow.
And I thought, that's pretty much true today. People don't listen to children. And it takes a lot of courage for a child to tell somebody that they were abused. Because, first of all, they don't think about it. And at school, public school today is more of a indoctrination center, and they focus on everything but reading, writing, and arithmetic. So they don't listen to children. And so adults just don't listen to children. I mean, many a child, I've counseled hundreds or more of women who were molested as a child. And every time, nobody believed them. They would go to their mother and they say, Daddy did such and such. And here's what usually happened. The mother either didn't believe the child and told him to shut up, or number two, they knew that the father, or had suspicions, or knew that the father was molesting the daughter, but she was scared to do anything about it.
Right.
Because he was physically abusive to her as well.
Her as well, yes.
And you see, years ago, there was no place for a mother to go like today. Today, in just about every city, there's a shelter for battered women. But that's a modern invention. Years ago, they didn't have that.
Yeah, and it would be difficult for them to get away from such abuse, especially if the woman had multiple children and didn't have a job or a way to fund and take care of herself and also the children. And so even in this day and age, that people become complacent and stay just because they have no where to go and no way to break away, which is unfortunate.
That's right. And every place I've lived, I've worked with the police department and educated them. And usually police now say, they say that when a child runs away from home, they're either running from something or running to something. They're running from abuse in the home. And so when the child is caught, then the Department of Children and Family Services need to be called in to investigate if the child is abused. So the child needs to be interviewed very cautiously before returning to the home. Or number two, a child is running to something. That means like silly teenage girls meet this guy on the internet and he says all the right things and they've talked to him for months and this girl thinks she's madly in love with this guy. And so she's running to him. And a lot of times that is how sex trafficking starts among teenage girls. So sex trafficking is also involved in many satanic cults and in the Illuminati because it makes a lot of money quick. I have counseled a woman that was abused when she was a child by Jeffrey Epstein. In fact, a news article came out today. I'm just reading it. Convicted pedophile given his own office on Harvard University campus and plans to genetically take over planet Earth. And the article says it sounds almost impossible to believe, but it's true. Jeffrey Epstein was funding research in how to completely change the human population of planet Earth, leaving just a tiny elite here, which is the Illuminati, basically a mass depopulation program. And Epstein gave a staggering $9 million to Harvard coffers to crunch the data and work out how humanity can be wiped out, leaving the elite in charge. And it goes on and says, Long after Epstein was placed on the pedophile register, he was given a nice office and a security access swipe card, which enabled him to prey on Harvard student girls. His favorite chat-up line was to offer a young freshman a place at Harvard, and then he topped it off, he would pay for her tuition. And he was developing, he was using genetic engineering to genetically engineer
Hold on, Dr. Bailey.
planet. Yes.
Hold on, we're at break. We'll be right back, everyone, for a second segment.
As a bookstore for truth seekers, it's our goal to make ancient manuscripts which were once held captive by secretive institutions available for public consideration. In our generation, where wisdom has increased as Daniel the prophet foretold, we have access to many of the testimonies our early church brethren were persecuted for preserving. After being hidden for centuries, these manuscripts have been leaked from various sources throughout the earth, and it's our goal to gather these sources into printable form to make available for all who seek the ancient way. If you're looking to deepen your studies of the biblical narrative, find these ancient manuscripts and more at sacredwordpublishing.com. Your partnership with Sacred Word Publishing goes further than the publishing of ancient manuscripts and weekly video content.
You also make a huge impact across the earth in orphanages in Myanmar, India, Uganda, and Kenya.
Your support is crucial for the development of the ecclesia of real truth seekers.
We thank you for joining us in hosting Secrets Revealed, Momentary Zen, the Digital Readers Club, Ask Me Anything series, and other shows that have helped lead so many to the truth of salvation.
To become even more involved, please visit patreon.com/sacredwordpublishing, where you can partake in exclusive, interactive, patron-only content and help us continue shining the light of love in this darkened world.
Many truth seekers are constantly studying alone. But there is a place where we can come together. The Digital Readers Club is our online ecclesia meant for those who've forsaken churchianity but still want the closeness of a family to study with. Join us every Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time to put together the puzzle pieces of truth scattered throughout the ancient scriptures. Mainstream narrative, it can feel like we are studying alone. So together with you, Sacred Word Publishing classes has begun. Are you interested in Biblical Hebrew, the Enochian calendar, extra biblical texts, or other esoteric topics? Join any class for free. Or do you have research you'd like to share with fellow truth seekers? We'd love to help you set up a class. As students, we also have an opportunity to be teachers, and whichever role you're settled into today, we'll be happy to study with you at swpclass.com. Email us at sacredwordpublishingllc@gmail.com with your class ideas, and we look forward to learning with you. See you in class!
Hello, friends. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm your host, Zen Garcia.
All right, welcome back, everybody. I'm going to turn it back over to you, Dr. Bailey, so you can finish up your thought. You were speaking about the ritual abuse of, children, and how the adults, and also, even the court systems. And I was going to ask you about the defects as well. I mean, because it seems like they're not to be trusted as well, that there's part or some element to them that is actually involved in the trafficking of children, and that certain children are targeted for maybe the way that they look, or the families that they're connected to, or anything about that you could share with us.
Well, I've counseled a lot of women who, when they were children, they were put in a foster home that the parents were Satanists.
Uh-huh.
And they were in this satanic foster home. The social worker was a Satanist as well,
Uh-huh.
that worked for the county. So they would take this child and take them to satanic rituals to be horribly abused. And if the child complained, the only one to complain to was the social worker, who was a Satanist as well.
Right.
And I've seen that a lot.
That's got to be a hopeless situation.
Yes, and they did feel hopeless. And
Mm-hmm.
Even people in the Illuminati, some of those that are higher up in the Illuminati, it's a ritual in which they give their first child up.
Mm-hmm.
And what they do is they give it up, and it's put into a foster home with people that are in the Illuminati, and they program that child, they abuse that child, they traumatize that child, they have paid programmers to come and program these children throughout the years as they're growing up. So again, there's no escape. And most of them are severely sexually abused. I'll give you one example. One woman I counseled, she was sexually abused more than any woman I've ever counseled in my life. She was probably sexually abused from the time she was born, and her father was a satanic high priest in New Jersey. And the whole family was Satanist, and most of the relatives, including the females, and they would have rituals in which they would all sexually abuse her from the time she was born till the time she was 18. And even when she left home at 18, they programmed her to come back to the cult. So right on up until she was 50 years old, when I started counseling her, was she still being sexually abused by the cult. and sometimes the mafia is a part of the satanic cult, and they do that because the mafia can sell drugs through the satanic cult, and it's easy, as in this case, to have the girls sex trafficked. So you ask, how can a father and mother sexually abuse their own child over and over and over again? Not hundreds of times, but thousands of times, literally. And let other men and women sexually abuse them, but they pay them so that's sex trafficking. Well, the reason is these people are sadistic, narcissistic sociopaths, to give a psychological evaluation of them. They're sadistic, narcissistic sociopaths. So they have no feelings. And then they would, this particular woman, to have extreme programming, they would take her to New York City. So right now in New York City, there's a building that in the basement they take children to, and they abuse them, traumatize them, and program them. Now, here's an example of their programming. If they wanted to program them to be an assassin, for example, they would chain her up to the wall without any clothes on. They would throw water on her, and then they would get a cattle prod and electrocute her with the cattle prod. And then they would show a movie like of karate, how to do a certain type of karate. And they would say, you watch it, and if you don't get the movements exactly right, we're gonna chain you to the wall, throw water on you, and electrocute you again. So she would watch this video of certain karate moves, then they would unchain her from the wall, and they would have her practice the karate. And if she got it wrong, they would do it all over again. And they would keep repeating it over and over again till she got that karate move exactly right. And then the next day, they would do the same thing again with the different karate moves that an assassin would need to kill somebody. And
Wow.
That's typical programming for an assassin, to make a child into an assassin.
Mm-hmm.
They've tried to kill me several times. I've been threatened. I've been threatened close to 100 times. When I say that, I'm talking about on the telephone. And they've sent Illuminati assassins twice to kill me. And one night I was getting ready to get in bed, and I just turned off the light, and God said, tomorrow someone's going to try to assassinate you. I said, okay, how should I pray? And he said, pray they'd forget their gun. Well, I thought that was funny. So I laughed, and I said, God, whoever is supposed to try to assassinate me tomorrow, I pray they'd forget their gun. And I chuckled again, and I got in bed and fell fast asleep. Next morning, I really forgot all about it. And I went to the office like usual. And about 10:15, this petite woman dressed in an expensive suit came to the door of the church office, and we keep the door locked. We had a electromagnetic lock, and the receptionist said, she said, I want to see Dr. Preston Bailey. She said, do you have an appointment? She says, no. So the receptionist said, you know, would you like to see her? I could see her through the glass. So I said, let her. So she came in the office, and she just started talking for 10 seconds. Then she reached with her right hand into her jacket where you would put a gun, you know, a holster, and she pulled it out, and she looked at her hand, and she said, she said out loud, I can't believe I forgot my gun. Well, I started laughing hysterical. I just thought that was the funniest thing in the world. And then she, what's called, switched. She was programmed, so she had a lot of personalities. So she switched into a masculine role, and she had a masculine voice, and she pointed her finger at me in a masculine, deep, threatening voice. Why are you laughing at me? So I told her what exactly happened the night before, because I'm a very open guy. And so she said, she calmed down immediately. She said, I've never met anybody like you in my life. She said, I have to admit, I am an Illuminati assassin. She says, I was programmed from birth to be an assassin. She said, my parents are in the Illuminati, my grandparents, my great-grandparents, going back many generations. So then we talked, and to make a long story short, she told me how assassins kill somebody. Now, I wouldn't know. I don't know how assassins kill anybody. So she told me how professional assassins kill somebody. Now, which proves that this was not made up, or she was psychotic, or she was out of her mind. She told me the two ways a professional assassin kills somebody, and she told me the reason why. And I don't know, we talked maybe 20 minutes, and I talked to her about becoming a Christian, and she said, 3 times, she said, I've never met anybody like you. She said, thank you for talking to me. I'll think about what you said. So she said, I have to go now. So she pushes the door open, and she looks back at me. For the first time, she smiled, and she said, I won't be back. And I said, praise the Lord, hallelujah. And I waved bye to her. But I believe so strongly in the power of God. That's why I laughed.
Yes, absolutely.
You see, so that just showed the power of God. And so after that, I stopped receiving threatening phone calls.
Wow.
But up to that, I had almost 100 threatening phone calls. They would say, we're going to kill you and your family. That's what they would say.
Mm-hmm. I was just going to say, with regard to your family, I can imagine that would be a grave concern, and that this would, force you to consider continuing in this line of work. But as you said, you are a godly man, and that you trust in the Most High for protection, and that's in similarity, myself and my family and my children, in the work that we do as well in serving the kingdom and exposing the truth. We also rely upon the protection of the Most High in all the things that we do. And I think that, of course, we are not in threat in the manner that you are, but, the Illuminati, they have eyes and ears everywhere, and certainly they don't like to be exposed. And yet, there are people that are standing up to reveal the truth. And so, if you wouldn't mind, Dr. Bailey, can you share with us some of the things that you've heard with regard to the Illuminati families, their plans, and why it is that they engage in, the harmful destruction of even their own children? I mean, you've got to be sadistically twisted to continue to inflict such behavior on a young, innocent child, a baby. I can't even understand the mindset.
Well, you have to keep in mind that from generation to generation,
Mm-hmm.
they abuse their children and they program them.
Yes.
So they're programmed to enjoy inflicting pain on other people. I listened to a video this week of a woman who used to be a porn star, and she was taken by the Illuminati for 10 years. She was an unusual case, and rich people in Hollywood would use her as a sex slave. And she said she named the famous actor just his first name. She just said his name was Tom, and he was a famous actor. And the first thing he did when he opened the door to my bedroom was to punch me in the face with his fist. Now, see, that's typical sadism among the Illuminati. They
Right.
get pleasure out of harming people.
Right.
So I'm not making an excuse for them at all.
Right.
But they're programmed from generation to generation to feel pleasure when someone is hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And especially if they cause pain to someone. It gives them a sense of power.
Right.
Now, when I was chairman of the Task Force on Child Abuse, I would see men who sexually abused children who weren't associated with any cult, and it just gave them a sense of power over the child, especially if the child was scared half to death.
Right.
And so these people are sadists. A sadist receives pleasure from hurting someone, and a sociopath is a person who has no conscience. So they could kill someone and go in the next room and put a smile on their face as if nothing happened.
Right.
And so if I go, I know the characteristics of people in Satanism or people in the Illuminati or people who are pedophiles. So if I walk in a room of 50 people, I will glance through the room to look for those that have characteristics of being a pedophile. And everybody else may think they're so great and nice and friendly. but I wouldn't interpret them that way at all, because a pedophile will probably be the friendliest person in that group.
Right. And they know how to work that to, open the doors and to take and find opportunity. These Illuminati families and the sexual trafficking that they're doing with their own kids and others. We had, not long ago, maybe a year or two, the documents that were released by WikiLeaks on the Pizzagate and all of that. Did you look into any of that? And I feel certain that yes, there is absolute truth to that, but of course, the uh, the audience, as far as the masses, it's just again too bizarre for them to entertain, and they just dismiss it as nonsense, and yet individuals like yourself know different and better.
Well, see, the problem is the general public are not trained to discern child abuse or pedophilia or sex trafficking. Usually, the more bizarre it sounds, the more real it is.
Uh-huh.
Because every day my telephone rings, and here's how the conversation starts out. Dr. Bailey, I have something strange to tell you. And I stop them and I say, look, every day, all day, I deal with strange things.
Uh-huh.
So what you're about to tell me is normal for me.
Right.
But it's not normal for other people. In fact, just this morning, I was counseling a woman that was in the Illuminati and had managed to escape. And she said, this is really strange. She says, nobody in my life believes me. She said, you're the only one who believes me. And so, but I can tell the difference between someone who is making it up and somebody that is real. Because there's a difference.
Yes, I can imagine.
I mean, I have some people call me who everything they say that they were sexually abused in the satanic cult was made up. And they got it from the internet.
Right.
But see, I know what Satanists do. After doing this for so many years, I know what Satanists do. I know what the rituals are, and I know the difference between a satanic cult and the Illuminati. Mm-hmm. I have led leaders of large satanic cults to Christ, and they became members of my church. So they would tell me what they did. Mm-hmm. They would go with me on cases. And I had one warlock. He was over 300 Satanists in the county. And wow. And he's the only person I ever met in my whole life, nor ever heard of, who did not use rituals in a satanic sermon. What he would do, he had been in it since he was 5 years old. The head demon of the area chose him. And that's how he got involved in it. So he would be in his room at 5 years old playing, and like he would be playing checkers or something. And his parents would open the door to his room, and objects would be floating in the air because the demon would be holding it. And they were scared to go in his room, so they never went in his room.
Hold on, Dr. Bailey. We'll be right back for second hour, everyone.
Truth Frequency Radio is your #1 source for news and information without the hate, hype, and fear. We're proud to feature cutting-edge programs like Beyond the Veil with Chris and Cherie Geo, X Squared with Brooks Agnew, Paranormal Portal with Brent Thomas, Jaronism Raw with Jaron and Missa, Fearless with Frank Castle, Strange World with Mark Sargent, The Eye of Ra with Ra Castaldo, The Infinite Fringe with Billy Ray, Ironworks with Josh Corey, The Kev Baker Show, and dozens more. Did you know you can listen from any telephone by dialing 641-793-7117 or call into your favorite show toll free at 833-TFR-LIVE. Uncensored talk and news you won't hear in the mainstream media. Truth Frequency Radio, your protection from deception.
Though the 2020 election is still a few years away, a new field of potential candidates is already emerging. And it's clear that the 2020 election could only go one of these 500 ways. After their devastating 2016 loss, the Democrats will attempt to answer Trump with a candidate who can rally the left and win back blue-collar voters, like Elizabeth Warren or one of these other people. Of course, this is all assuming Trump even makes it to re-election. Depending on the outcome of the Russia investigation, souring GOP attitudes, or some other current unknown, the GOP could decide to run a candidate like Mike Pence or any of his 20 neighbors. Then again, this all relies on the two-party system, which might not be relevant in the 2020 election. It's entirely possible that one or both of the two major parties could split off into much smaller factions. On the left, the Democratic Party could scatter into thousands of 4 to 5 person roving pods who grow by absorbing others through battles of the wits. One possible outcome for Republicans is that fiscal conservatives pair up with diabetic libertarians and recently divorced soccer moms to create an entirely new party under one of dozens of possible monikers, like the Bald Eagle Coalition. Despite all these potential outcomes, the thing we know for sure is that one of them will definitely happen.
It's the story that's stunning the tech world. Despite his age, 6-year-old data entry prodigy Jeffrey Peters is already entertaining offers from dozens of major temp agencies. Experts say Jeffrey's abilities to sit still and perform mind-numbing tasks in Excel and Word for hours on end rank with a freelance worker 3 times his age.
I've always wanted to work at Maverick Recruiting.
The data entry whiz is at the center of a bidding war between industry titans like Workforce Solutions and Metropolitan Staffing, both offering lavish perks like starting salaries of up to $15,000 and a cramped cubicle shared with only 2 other temps. Jeffrey's parents say that given the generous offers he's already received, he could be well on the way to affording a dingy rundown apartment of his own.
Wherever you are, make it Truth Frequency Radio.
All right, welcome back everybody for a second hour. In the Franklin cover up the young children that were reporting the abuse, and that ended up being in this documentary called The Conspiracy of Silence, but was this documentary was unfortunately pulled in moments before it was supposed to air nationwide, and to make the American public aware of these kind of things, and that the abuse of these children was taking place even in high levels of the political parties, and the kind of ritual abuse they were talking about was that they were forced to take part in, even the slaughter of innocents of young children. And Paul Bonacci even described being taken out to Bohemian Grove, being forced to be involved in, this illicit sex with other young boys, and then he saw one murdered in front of him and dumped from a helicopter in a place where there were very large trees, and all of these things were reported in his diary and shared by Senator John DeCamp, who ended up representing these children pro bono. But are you familiar with the Hampstead, the young children that were there in the UK, and that reported that their father was basically pimping them out, and that he was also involved. He was the principal of this school, and that the other teachers were involved in, sexually and satanically, ritually abusing the children that were going to this school. But then a judge, like in the case that you mentioned previously, forced them to recant their testimony, and that all of what was going on was squelched. And that this happens, even in the in other cases, like that Jimmy, I forget his last name, but he was a high-level Illuminati Satanist there in the UK, was protected also. But can you make mention or tell us a little bit about?
I'm not familiar with that specific case. I do counsel a number of people in England, and many people in the Illuminati live in England. Many of the leaders live in England. But I would say that, first of all, the judge should be thrown in jail.
Absolutely.
And then the father.
Absolutely.
But unfortunately, that's typical for high-level Satanism or Illuminati.
Mm-hmm.
Illuminati. I'm surprised the case got that far.
Right.
But that's typical. Let me tell you. Let me just talk about pedophiles so your audience can understand. A pedophile is always going to find easy access with children. For example, in California, one of the gymnastics coach that was one of the most sought after coaches, he, after years of molesting these girls, 300 girls he molested, he finally was arrested and put in prison.
Mm-hmm.
Now, why did this go on for years? Why didn't the girls tell? Well, even if the girls told their parents, the parents wouldn't have believed it for the reasons I mentioned earlier. Parents need to listen to their children.
Right.
When my sons came home from school, I sat them down and I say, what did your teachers tell you today that you disagreed with? So parents need to say that to their children every day.
Right.
And what went on at school that bothered you today? That would include anybody.
Right.
It is child abuse, sexual abuse, and rape. Most of the time, they don't report it because of some fear. So
Right.
so this goes on around the world because of the natural fear of any kind of sexual abuse. So parents need to train their child not to fear. You mentioned earlier, you're fearless. You don't fear what these people threaten you. Well,
Right.
I have learned through the years to be fearless.
Yes.
If they threaten to kill me, I say, well, I'll just go to heaven to be with Jesus. Hallelujah.
Yes. Hallelujah.
And secondly, I don't have to pay bills and I won't have any stress anymore.
Right. Right.
And I say, thirdly, I said, if you come to my house, I can kill you.
Right.
They never thought of that.
Uh-huh.
My roommate in the seminary, the largest seminary in the world, he was the world's champion in Kung Fu from Hong Kong. So he taught me what he knew. But Christians are not to be doormats for the world. The Bible says the righteous are as bold as lions.
Mhm.
So we shouldn't fear anyone nor anything. And
Agreed.
if we focus on being fearless, everything else is secondary.
Yes.
See?
Yes.
And we need to listen to our children.
Absolutely.
This goes on because nobody listens to the children.
Right.
Teachers don't listen to their students. And even at church, I had 3 pastors arrested for molesting children in their congregation.
Wow.
In fact, I counseled a woman recently. Her pastor molested her when she was a teenager in the church.
Uh-huh.
And another one, in another church, the minister of youth molested her and others in the church. So parents need to take more responsibility and not pawn off their kids to somebody else to watch.
Yes. Absolutely agree.
That's the big problem. But a pedophile has access to children. I've counseled people who were molested by their Boy Scout leader, by their Sunday school teacher, by their teacher in public school, by their neighbor. One mother told me for 4 years, her 3 children were molested and ritually abused by their next door neighbor that was Satanist, and they would take them to meetings, and they would volunteer to watch the kids while they went out to eat or something. And and this traumatized the kids, and the kids never told their parents, and the parents were ministers.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever you're gone away from your children, you need to ask them, give them the third degree.
All right.
In fact, a study was done of social workers who deal with child abuse every day and examine, go into the homes and find out. And it was discovered that 100% of the social workers said that if their children were abused, that they would tell them. In reality, when the social workers' children were abused, only 1 in 10 actually told their parent that was the social worker.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But in the Illuminati, it's passed from generation to generation. So it is
Right.
the accepted norm.
Yes. I was going to ask you a question as well, because we know that they also are seeking these kind of positions, like, becoming the head of a Boy Scout troop or something like that, and that this was and has been a problem, and that there's been a cover-up, or the way that the priests in the Catholic Church, that there's also been documentaries even released on Netflix about how the Catholic priest, the head of a particular girls' school, that they were abusing all these girls, and that it was covered up, and that even the sergeant of the police, he was also involved, and that all of this was covered up. And they're very bold in that these Freemasonic fraternities and groups, they extend everywhere, and people and parents just don't realize it. But in your years, do you see this in looking into and helping others? Do you see these things getting worse and more predominant because it seems like there's more exposure to this kind of thing? Um, uh,
It's getting worse.
that's yeah.
And there is every Mason isn't a child molester, but I've counseled a lot of males and females who were molested in Masonic lodges as a ritual, as a ceremony. One woman, she was in her 30s when I talked to her. When she was about 6 or 7 years old, her father took her to, he was a Mason, he took her to a Masonic lodge, and they tied her to a low table, and all these dirty old men with nothing but this little apron on would go by and rape the little girl. And it was a part of a ceremony that they did.
That's so messed up.
And I have heard this a number of times, that a lot of times Masons were involved in it. And if I knew nothing about the Masonic Lodge, except the people I've counseled, I would say it is a sex cult.
Right. Yeah, and the abnormal abuse of children seems to be ritualized as part of the worship of the Luciferian satanic that religion that they have made it all part of what they do, and that, you know, again, in these higher level Illuminati Masonic places, even a woman named Savali spoke about how she had underwent sexual abuse and had witnessed even young children being slaughtered as part of ritual abuse under, you know, a certain castle, and also in the Vatican, in the catacombs, in these deep underground places, that these kind of things were taking place with a lot of the high level, you know, royal families and people that are part of those particular bloodlines. And, you know, after going public with all this information, she disappeared, in similarity to Arizona Wilder, after she also brought forth confession. And so I know that it's got to be very difficult for individuals to break away from these Illuminist families and to even, you know, speak with individuals like yourself that are out there trying to help. And so, are you, and I'm sure that, you know, many people are reaching out to you, but do you find that this is such an overwhelming issue that, you know, there's not even enough people to really do this kind of work?
No, there's just not enough people. And to tell you the truth, there's actually a high turnover rate because of the depth of wickedness. And I use the word wickedness in a mild sense. The depth of wickedness that happens to these children, you wonder how they even survived.
Right.
And many of them will say, am I just making it up? And I tell them, I go, this is so horrendous. You couldn't make this up in your worst nightmare.
Right.
And you see, for example, he's dead now, so I can mention, I went to Minnesota and did a seminar on these things. And so the counselors brought their most difficult cases to me during a break. I mean, I'm not exaggerating, but counselors were lined up with their clients for me to counsel them, even the short period of time between a break. And I never got a break all week long. Even after they took me to supper, they took their clients with them. And so while I'm eating, I'm counseling this person with SRADID. 3 separate women from 3 different states who came to the conference. They didn't know each other, but when they were around 7 or 8 years old, they were sexually abused by Senator Robert Byrd.
Yes.
And they all gave me his address and telephone number. I don't know the address and telephone number of any senator.
Right.
And it's almost impossible to get it.
Right.
And they would tell me the details.
Yeah, that stands as confirming witness to the truth of their testimony. And again, in the, you know, like the Kathy O'Brien, she spoke about being pimped out even amongst the Clintons.
Yeah,
you know,
that's right. Well,
right.
Hillary is in the Illuminati bloodline.
Yes, right.
But Bill is not. Bill is a country boy.
Yeah. Well, the
But Bill
Bushes
is the
were
second.
also. Yes, right. Yeah, he was involved with Epstein and the Lolita Express and
That's right.
all of that as well.
Now, like I said, I counseled a woman who, as a child, was taken to Epstein Island. And here's what she told me. She said that in that gold-colored building on the end of the island that looks like a temple, she said that it was filled with like 5 or 6 different sized jars of aborted babies.
Oh my gosh.
And she said that she was there for years. So that's how she knew these things. She said that Epstein would hire world famous geneticists, and he would do genetic research on these aborted babies, because it's like Joseph Mengele in Nazi Germany would do genetic research on these children to discover different things. And that's what this geneticist did on Epstein Island. He would do it in the same way. So the Illuminati does genetic engineering because they want to make either a super soldier, as was in the news recently, that talked about China came actually out and said, we are developing genetically engineered super soldiers for our military. And the United States military has been working on this for years. But many, as far as being in the Illuminati, many politicians, many of the high brass in the military, in the Pentagon, and many famous rich people, they got rich because when they reached a certain age, the Illuminati money, which they have estimated $400 trillion, which is more than most countries have, they use their money to bankroll them.
Right.
Because to build $1 billion empire, it takes a lot of money to get started.
Right.
Very few individuals have that kind of money.
Yes. And that's why we see, generationally, over hundreds of years, that the Masonic Order, the Knights Templar, they were also said to be involved in very strange ritual abuse and sodomy and things of that nature. And that was part of the normal practice of that order. And, of course, these Illuminati banking, and these families, that they've had this power and this wealth and this status and control for a very long time. Even the Mormons, the church, the Mormon church is very wealthy and owns, as well as the Catholic Church, owns a lot of land and property and castles and buildings, even has their own country. And so the infrastructure has been established worldwide for these Illuminists to utilize, and that the ritual abuse, even of the nuns, that there has been people speaking about how the nuns have been abused. and that they've been forced to keep quiet about these kind of things. But particularly children have been targeted and have been abused in such manner that, even with the Franklin cover-up, that was the first documented case that I know of where the Catholic priests involved with the boys club and the girls in the Boys and Girls Club of Omaha, that the finger was pointed at them in their involvement with this ritual abuse. All right, hold on, Dr. Bailey. We'll be right back for the final segment.
From the dawn of man, we have turned to nature to help attain balance within ourselves. But somewhere, we lost our way. Western culture is once again remembering the healing benefits of CBD, the non-psychoactive component of the hemp plant. That's why more and more people who use CBD report relief from inflammation and chronic pain, balanced blood sugar and cardiovascular system, relief from muscle tensions, tremors, migraines, headaches, anxiety, depression, and the list goes on. The big question is, where do you get it? Life is a 99% pure CBD oil made with all organic ingredients, and it's available to TFR listeners worldwide. If you use coupon code TFR at checkout, you'll get $5 towards your order. Head on over to ialife.com now. That's AYA life.com.
Hey, it's Grace. Can we talk about something serious for a minute? Your age. Getting old has its perks. But remember, being a few years younger, your hair was thicker, you didn't have so many wrinkles, that extra weight wasn't haunting you, and you just felt better. Well, we can't turn back the clocks and go back 10 or 15 years, but you can start feeling and looking 10 or 15 years younger with Nature's Youth RSF. It's a doctor-formulated daily supplement that helps your body maintain its peak performance and fight the aging process. Imagine sleeping better, looking better, and feeling better. See how Nature's Youth RSF has helped thousands of people just like you at naturesyouth.com. naturesyouth.com. Imagine how it will feel when your family and friends are asking you what you did to look so good. Your secret will be Nature's Youth RSF. It's time to start looking better and feeling better. Learn more and order your Nature's Youth RSF at naturesyouth.com. That's naturesyouth.com. That's naturesyouth.com.
Hi, I'm Sergeant Jim Ram, retired. In early 2012, I was facing a laundry list of chronic health conditions that my physician was telling me were incurable. I knew there had to be a better way, and I learned how I could reverse every one of my ailments with science-based, clinically verified medical nutrition. In just a few months, I was able to reverse high blood pressure, gastric reflux, sleep apnea, arthritis, degenerative disc disease, heart arrhythmia, AFib, and many more. And I've lost over 70 pounds and kept it off. Now I'm hosting a radio program that's dedicated to helping my listeners do the same. If you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, if you're sick of being used as an ATM by your doctor, then you'll want to tune into the Your DIY Health radio program here on Truth Frequency Radio every Thursday from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern and 6 to 8 a.m. Pacific.
You are now tuned into the Truth Frequency.
Your protection from deception. TFR.
Truth Frequency Radio.
All right, welcome back, everybody, for final segment. I'm joined this evening by Dr. Preston Bailey. He has written a book on spiritual warfare and the satanic abuse. Dr. Bailey, if you would, can you talk about your book and share with us some of maybe the contents, the chapter titles, headings?
Sure.
Yeah, I think that would be great.
Yeah, the name of my book is Spiritual Warfare, Defeating the Forces of Darkness. Or you could go to my website, spiritualwarfarecenter.com. That's Spiritual Warfare Center, CENTER.com. And my book is on there. It's on Amazon. All you have to do is type in Dr. Preston Bailey in Amazon, and it'll take you right to my book. But let me read the chapter headings here. I have 12 chapters. Chapter 1, The Necessity for Spiritual Warfare. Chapter 2, The Heavenly Forces of Spiritual Warfare. Chapter 3, The Evil Dictator of Darkness. Chapter 4, Understanding the Nature and Character of the Devil. Chapter 5, Satan's Organizational Structure. Chapter 6, How to Respond to Different Types of Demonic Attacks. Most people use the same method to resist it, and that doesn't work. Mm-hmm. Chapter 7, Can Evil Enter the Life and Body of a Christian? Chapter 8, How Satan Attacks Christians. Chapter 9, How Satan Attacks Those that are not Christians. Chapter 10, The Necessity for the Armor of God for Battle. Chapter 11, The Armor of Satan. And Chapter 12, The Christian Soldier. Mm-hmm. And no other book, to my knowledge, in history tells about the different degrees of attack of demons except me in the book. And again, it's Spiritual Warfare, Defeating the Forces of Darkness. And the Bible tells about demons, but I learned probably a lot more in detail about it from leading these Satanists to Christ, who would tell me from their viewpoint what they do. In fact, the head of the largest satanic cult with like 7 states he was in charge of, he was arrested for child pornography and put in prison for 4 or 5 years. And 2 weeks before he got out, a friend of mine led him to Christ. And so when he got out, he wanted me to talk to him because he had been programmed as a child. And it was really a bizarre thing. What happened is his house burned down and both his parents died in the fire. And he was just 5 years old in his pajamas. And so he managed to escape from the fire and just started walking down the street. And the fire trucks passed him, and nobody noticed this 5-year-old boy walking down the street. And it was dark at night. And this van with several Satanists in it happened to be driving around, and they saw the kid and they kidnapped him. And all of his relatives assumed he burned up in the fire. Mm-hmm. But he didn't, and they raised him. And he was ritually abused over and over again. And when the cult leader died, he came in charge. So he ran it, and they have to have funds, so they get it through pornography and or through what's called snuff films. In a ritual, they murder someone, and they put it on tape. They film it, and people that are sick and twisted buy those snuff films.
Right.
And they also do sex trafficking or sell drugs. So that's the ways that most satanic cult groups make money. The Illuminati may have sex trafficking, but usually they have inherited wealth. Like Queen Elizabeth inherited $2 to $3 billion.
Mm-hmm.
And she doesn't have to spend any money because England pays for all her expenses. So that $2 billion grows in interest. And when she dies, her husband's already dead. When she dies, then it goes to her children. And it passes down from generation to generation. And that's the way the Illuminati does. They have inherited wealth, but they're also ritually abused.
Right.
But I counseled 2 people today that were coming out of the Illuminati. So they have, when they get out, they have demons attack them on a regular basis to try to get them, to pressure them to get back in.
Right. These families and these children that come out of these situations, there was a case in Canada that accused the royal families, even certain princes, of even holding hunting parties where they were keeping as trophy the phalluses of the individuals that they hunted down, and that this was said to be proven in a court, and that survivors of some of this ritual abuse came forth to testify that there was a number of these individuals that were testifying as to these kind of things occurring. Have you heard of anything like that? And also, if you wouldn't mind, can you share with us examples of the kind of satanic rituals or that these individuals were forced to participate in, just to bring forth a little bit more description for the listening audience that just doesn't get it.
A third of the people I counsel are from Canada. So I have a good taste of the type of abuse that goes on in Canada. Canada often has extreme abuse that goes on forever. I counsel one woman. It was a high-level satanic cult, but they were sex traffickers. So they in Canada, there's a number of places where there are old mines where they dug some mineral out of the ground and it dried up. So you have all these huge old mines and big areas. So they have large meetings there of hundreds of people, and most of these people are usually rich. So they are they're connected to the royal family. They're connected to the government. They're connected to the military. They're usually in any medium to large police station. There's at least one officer that is a Satanist and helps cover up satanic ritual crimes. And that is why satanic ritual abuse is rarely convicted in a court of law. Right. Because it's stopped by the Satanist that's a policeman before it gets very far. What they do in a ritual is they would have a pentagram on the ground with all of the insignias inside the star, the 5-pointed star, the pentagram, and then they would have a circle around it. So they would have to put the child within the circle. And that's called a power circle. Mm-hmm. And if they have people standing within that circle around the child, they have to make sure they don't stand outside the circle during the ritual, because if they do, the demon will attack them and break their foot or something like that.
Wow.
And so they pray to the demon of the north, east, west, and south. That's where we get the word news, by the way. And whichever demon comes, represented by the direction, the north, east, west, or south, then they put the head of the altar facing that direction of that demon from either the north, east, west, or south. Mm-hmm. So then they decide what ritual they want to perform. So they'll often have a circle of fire around that pentagram with the child on it. And they would often have what's called demon calling rituals and revelations. So they'll walk in a circle in a hooded robe, and they'll either wear a white, a red, or a black robe, depending on the type of ritual or ceremony they perform. And they walk and chant around, usually in Latin, and they summon the demons, and the demons enter the child, and the demons hurt the child from the inside of their body, which is horrible. And so then after the fire goes out and they command the demons to leave, then the men will have sex with the child. Or depending on what the ritual is, they have 4 high holy days a year. In a black mass, I just talked to someone yesterday with DID, and they were forced to go to a black mass. In a black mass, it's like a Catholic mass or communion or Lord's Supper, and instead of drinking wine or grape juice, they drink blood, urine, and something else, usually alcohol, strong alcohol or something like that. And then everybody drinks it. Everybody's forced to drink it. And they kill a child, and they cut it up, and they put the child over like a rotisserie and cook the child, and then they cut it up and they put it on the table, and they have the black mass in which they eat the child, and they quote what Jesus said, "This is flesh of my flesh and bones of my bones." So they eat the flesh of the child. So that's what they do during a black mass.
Wow. Yeah, some very evil stuff going on. And again, it's very difficult for the listening audience to wrap their minds around this kind of behavior. But we have about 8 minutes remaining, Dr. Bailey. And so I'd like for you to share whatever you think is the most important aspect of the work that you do, and whatever you would like to bring forth in closing statements in that period of time. And again, if you would share your contact information or your anything that you have in the as far as public, your website, and I don't know if you have Facebook or YouTube or anything of that nature.
Yeah. According to the FBI statistics, 1 in 4 of children, 1 in 4 females are sexually abused, and 1 in 7 males. So that means if there's a church of 100 people and 50% are women and 50% are men, that means 25% of the 50 women were abused as a child. Now, at least 9 times out of 10, those women are not ever ministered to in that church. And 1 in 7 male of those 50 men were molested as a child. And someone had to abuse those children. And so I can guarantee you, in every congregation of 100, there's a minimum of 5 men who sexually abuse those children. A minimum.
It's horrible.
Now, I usually have found out who they were. Because God's just given me a special ability. And I actually found kidnapped children by satanic cults. I actually rescued them. It was never in the papers for their own protection. But so when I say I'm fearless, that's true. So, so the best thing that can be done is, number one, listen to children and believe what children say.
Right.
Ask questions of children. And most of all, pray that God's judgment would come upon these evil people. These are evil,
Yes.
sadistic, narcissistic sociopaths. And remember what I said, in a group of 50 people, they're probably the friendliest person there. Because usually everybody likes them.
Right, right.
And that's a bad sign. That's not a good sign.
Right.
Because nobody acts that way in real life. Most people that are married have arguments. So nobody acts that way in real life.
Right.
So they're acting that way for some reason.
Right.
And if I get 300 emails a day, but if you want to email me, it's Newton3law@AOL.com. Newton, the number 3, law@AOL.com. But again, my website is spiritualwarfarecenter.com. That's CENTER, spiritualwarfarecenter.com. But people need to ask questions of their children. Grandparents need to ask questions, because even though my wife is elementary principal, I don't trust public schools, because they teach. A mother told me just today, she said, they taught my 5-year-old at school that they can change their gender if they want to at 5 years old.
That's so crazy.
That's none of the business of public schools. Parents need to find out every day what their child learns, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And you need to speak out if it's bad and ugly. But you need to pray against the forces of evil. Now, here's how you do it. Matthew 16, 18 through 19, and Matthew 18, 19 through 20. It's the identical verse within 3 chapters. So it must be important to Jesus, so it should be important to us. And this is the key of the Christian life. Basically, you bind the evil by the blood of the Lamb, and you release the power of God by faith. You release the resources of God, the blessings of God, the promises of God, and God's heavenly army. So you bind the forces of evil in your community. If something is attacking you, you say, I bind these evil spirits by the blood of the Lamb, and I release God's army to chain them and drag them to the feet of Jesus to be judged. Now that's as simple as I can get it. So you bind the evil, whatever the evil may be, by the blood of the Lamb, and you release the resources of God by faith. You release the power of God. Edmund Burke said, evil conquers when good men do nothing. The founder of the Methodist movement, John Wesley, said, God does nothing except through the intercessory prayer of the saints. So we're to pray against this evil. And pray for these children that are abused. Pray that that somebody would listen to them. Somebody would do something about it.
Yes. Dr. Bailey, do you have any other books coming out in the future, or are you working on anything new? We got just 1 minute remaining.
Yeah, I'll be working on probably details of things I've already mentioned today. I'll be working on a book on each of those subjects to come out.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Bailey, for joining us.
Thank you so much for letting me on your program.
God bless you and the work you do. Good night, all. Shalom.
Truth Frequency Radio is your #1 source for news and information without the hate, hype, and fear. We're proud to feature cutting-edge programs like The Christopher Everard Show, The Covert Report with Susan Linden.
Thank you everybody for joining us for this video and this broadcast. We appreciate all of you and thank you for your patronage. Please do like and subscribe and share with your friends. God bless all of you in your seeking.